Hello, I'm Katherine. I'm a freshman at Clemson University, and as a part of our Library 100 course, we attended a new student dialogue, which is basically a discussion group based on a topic that you're interested in. And the one I went to is called The Mirror's False Reflection, a dialogue on body image. It addressed a bunch of issues that deal with weight and body image and how our society shapes that. And we explored socialization in body image and how culture affects that. And we communicated to see different perspectives of how a different background might affect your body image. And we also talked about misconceptions that happen in our society that affect the way we see ourselves, like posters, images, commercials that are unrealistic shapes and looks that, as teenagers and young adults, affect our image of what the body should look like, what's most desirable. And we tried to analyze those physical norms in the United States based on those social pressures. And basically, at the New Student Dialogue, it was a big discussion. People were not lecturing. It was, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about that? We started the night off by watching a video, and it was all about shame and how we as a people use vulnerability as a negative connotation, but how being vulnerable can actually be a positive connotation, how vulnerability leads us into feelings such as love and deep, meaningful relationships. I'm not sure that my group achieved the main goal of just talking about body images, but I think we achieved a broader scope of how we feel about ourselves. We did something here that I want to show everyone. We did a social identity wheel, and basically it talked about how we see ourselves. There were certain categories like ethnicity, race, physical abilities, and we had to rate them on how we see ourselves and which categories represent us the most. And for example, mine was physical, emotional, and developmental ability. I feel like that describes me, and that's what I identify with more so than, say, my ethnicity, which I think I put my age and ethnicity as least important to my identity. And next, what we did is we used our identity wheel to then do an identity timeline. And basically, we took our most identifiable aspect of ourselves, so mine was the physical abilities, and put it in a timeline talking about what influences shaped that identity in us. And so I started off saying, 0 to 5 years old, my parents were a big part, but when I got to 6 to 10, it turned into teachers, peers, shaping how I saw that part of me and shaping that characteristic of me. And it wasn't all, this new student dialogue was not all about body image, but it was more about how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And body image was just a sub part of that. So I'm not sure we achieved this dialogue just about body image and weight, but we more achieved about how, as a social group, we communicate and feel, and how we view things like self-esteem and vulnerability and courage and the meanings of those in our lives and how they affect how we see ourselves and how we act. And then we talked about that in a general scope, and then as a side scope talked about how that related to body image. So we talked about how people view vulnerability as a negative connotation, and putting yourself out there as a negative connotation, where that makes it connect to body image as putting yourself out there just for who you are can be seen as bad, and not just being yourself and being healthy is actually good. Or so we were talked about how being vulnerable sometimes and just showing your true self is a good thing, just like showing your true body image is a good thing, not having to distort it with things such as anorexia and bulimia and all those other things which are not who you really are. And so those were the main focuses of our new student dialogues. And we had a discussion, not a lecture, which was good because then we got different opinions. I know there were some people in my group who are not from America, and they had a whole different perspective on the meanings of vulnerability and courage, and it was different than mine, and the discussion helped because it wasn't just me voicing my opinions, but me absorbing other people's opinions. And when I absorbed other people's opinions, I could get different perspectives, see things from different people's point of view, be in their shoes, so to say, and I developed a better understanding of what my definition was by listening to other people. There were a lot of active roles in my dialogue, and I think I probably was one of them. I tend to talk a lot. I like to voice my opinion. There, however, were a lot of really quiet people, and they did not voice their opinion at all, and it did damper the discussion because you do want to get everyone's perspective because everyone has a different, everyone has a different opinion of what's going on and a different opinion of the definitions of vulnerability and how our society affects how we view things and people. And so people not talking and being reserved really did hurt the discussion, but there were a lot of active roles, and a lot of the people who were voicing their opinions were very different. I know there was this one point in the discussion where me and this other girl who was talking a lot had very opposite opinions, and but it wasn't a hostile way. It was very, this is my opinion. Okay, that's fine. That's great. And this is your opinion, and that's your opinion. And I'm not going to, down you for it, but that's your opinion. So there were some active voices, and that helped bring the discussion along, because if it's just, me talking, it doesn't help me, and it doesn't help everyone else because they only get that one opinion. So there were a few active roles and some people who said a comment here and there. We broke up into small groups about an hour into the night to discuss our timelines and to discuss our social identities, and that brought out a lot of people. I know there was someone in my small group who did not say one sentence during the big discussion, but once we got in our small groups, she was opening up, talking about her timeline, and even adding opinions to other people's timelines, and it was great. And that small group helped bring out those active voices, and it helped everyone else grow. The role that I played in my big group is I tried to listen a bunch and talk and voice my opinion, but at the same time not put down anybody else's. That's a big concern of mine because I don't want people to think I'm pushing my opinions on them. So I did try to listen, but I think I was probably more of an active role, and hopefully no one thought I was being overly active. I think that the dialogue is a component of Library 100 because it helps students learn to communicate with others. It helps everyone else learn that not everyone's like you. Everyone has different opinions, everyone has different perspectives, and I think the discussion part of that really helped the how should you communicate when you difference in opinion with someone else. And I also think it helped because in my new student dialogue, we learned a lot about social identity, and a lot of times it felt like a big therapy session. So it really helped, I think, bring out certain topics that we as people are hesitant to talk about. I do not see it as a useful experience in every day, but there will be some times when confrontations come or I have to face my own self when talking about my own identity, and I think things I learned in other people's opinions and other people's words of wisdom will definitely help me.